Today we'll talk about the following. Incredible. Ukrainian forces have stopped the Russian advance on the front and attacked Russian logistics. Moscow, which wants to continue the war, is withdrawing from peace talks with Kyiv, using the conflict in the Middle East as a pretext. But it seems the explosions there won't last long, as the president of Iran has publicly apologized to neighboring countries. Could another war really break out in Europe? The conflict between Hungary and Ukraine has reached its highest peak. And public threats. And Russian bombers have entered Alaska's air defense zone. Why did they fly there? All this and more right now? Hello, I'm Karina Kleishin, and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, leave a like, and let's get to the news. Russia is preparing for a new offensive this spring. President Zelensky stated this during his visit to Donetsk region. But Ukrainian soldiers continue to fight back. Today, the Ukrainian Defense Forces attacked the territory of Donetsk airport with ATAK-MS and Scalp missiles, where the Russians had set up a drone launch site. These were kamikaze drones of the Shahid type, which attack Ukrainian cities. Now, attacks from there will be impossible. And in the city of Kupiansk, the Skelia regiment repelled and cleared the district hospital college and the machine building plant of occupiers. They also took
the individuals who were being held as prisoners within the high-security correctional facility were being monitored with extreme care and vigilance by the armed guards on duty throughout every single hour of their lengthy confinement inside the cold stone cells. In the meantime,
the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine stopped the offensive in the Zaporizhzhia direction. During active operations, special forces eliminated over 300 occupiers, killed and wounded. Another 39 Russian soldiers were taken prisoner. With precise strikes from drones and artillery, military intelligence operatives are systematically limiting the Russians' logistical capabilities. Due to a lack of supplies, Russian occupiers are increasingly refusing to carry out assault operations in this direction. Ukrainian soldiers are also giving the enemy no peace on their own territory. Border guards from the Kemera unit are striking military targets in the Bryansk region. Ukrainians continue to fight against dictatorship and defend their territories. Meanwhile, Moscow, which wants to prolong the war, is withdrawing from peace talks with Kyiv, using the conflict in the Middle East as a pretext. These are the conclusions of experts from the Institute for the Study of War. Are the negotiations really over? Or is this just a temporary pause? Has Trump really lost all interest in the war in Ukraine? More details coming up.
Putin wants to withdraw from peace negotiations with Ukraine. The war in the Middle East will serve as a pretext.
Kremlin officials are criticizing the United States for military operations against Iran and are using the escalation of the conflict in the Middle East to create conditions that would allow them to blame the US for any future failures in peace negotiations regarding Ukraine. In
the context of negotiations, the war in Iran played into Moscow's hands. Over the past few weeks, the Russians have focused on sabotaging the peace process.
If you remember, they already, after Geneva, they were preparing the ground to disrupt them. What are they doing? If you remember, they were talking about nuclear rhetoric, about how if France or Britain, though they still haven't decided completely, are planning to transfer nuclear weapons to Ukraine.
With the pseudo-historian Medinsky leading the delegation, fake stories about the transfer of nuclear weapons and the alleged attempt by Ukraine to eliminate Putin in Valdai, Russian propagandists and officials were pushing the narrative of the unreliability of negotiations.
in their relations with the United States, they often speak about the spirit of Anchorage being undermined and destroyed. They believe this is happening because of the various actions taken by the United States government.
The point is that in the negotiations, the Kremlin is interested exclusively in Ukraine's capitulation, with the voluntary withdrawal of the armed forces of Ukraine from the territory of Donbass. Kyiv obviously will not agree to such demands from the aggressor.
Regarding the territorial issue, as I told you, we are looking for a compromise between two absolutely polar positions. We have not yet fully found it, In the end, we will have to state that either we have found a solution and we all completely end this war, or likewise, we all take responsibility for not finding a solution and continue to kill each other, which, frankly, we are doing quite efficiently and professionally.
At the same time, Washington continues to believe in the negotiation process. According to Donald Trump, the war with Iran has not affected his position in any way.
As for Russia and Ukraine, where does this stand on my list of priorities? Very high. I've seen a lot of hatred in my life, but I think this is at the very top of the scale. I believe it will happen. Sometimes I blame one side, sometimes I blame the other, but this is high on my list. And
While negotiations are on hold, both Russia and Ukraine are becoming noticeable participants in the Middle Eastern war. Moscow is providing military and political support to the Iranian regime.
they support us politically and on other issues. Military cooperation between Iran and Russia is no secret. You know, we have worked with each other before, and this continues, and I hope it will continue in the future.
Kyiv, according to Volodymyr Zelensky, will provide support to the US and their Middle Eastern allies who are suffering from
this sophisticated unmanned aerial vehicle, which was manufactured by the Islamic Republic of Iran, has recently become a subject of significant international attention due to its deployment in various modern regional conflicts and its advanced surveillance and strike capabilities. These strategic attacks. This can definitely be used to significantly strengthen their overall negotiating position during the course of the entire investigation.
By the way, the current president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, has publicly apologized to the Gulf countries for the attacks. According to him, Tehran does not intend to carry out aggression against neighboring countries. He emphasized that he considers the countries of the region as brothers. But Iran has no intention of invading the territory of its neighbors. On the contrary, the country's authorities seek to join efforts with regional countries to establish peace and stability. It seems that World War III is cancelled. Moreover, as stated by the Iranian Interim Council, they will not carry out further strikes on countries unless there are attacks from their territory. Although earlier this morning an Iranian drone attacked Dubai International Airport.
We're hitting the airport. We are currently making our way toward the International Airport Terminal to catch our upcoming flight, navigating through the local traffic as we go.
Could another war really break out in Europe? The highest peak of the conflict between Hungary and Ukraine has been reached. In Budapest, Ukrainian cash couriers performing their regular route have been detained. The Ukrainian authorities state that Ukrainians have simply been taken hostage and call this a provocation. All this is happening against the backdrop of threats from Hungarian Prime Minister ORBAN to force Ukraine to act on his terms. At the same time, the Hungarian authorities, together with the opposition, accused Zelensky, allegedly claiming that he is threatening them. What happened and what risks does this pose for Ukraine? Find out next, in our report. Hungarian political pressure on Ukraine has reached its peak. The pro-Russian Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, is threatening to force Kyiv to act on his terms by force. It seems he has already moved to action.
The political pressure we are witnessing today is entirely unprecedented in modern history, but it all came about precisely because of the unwavering persistence and the relentless consistency shown by Viktor Orban and the inner circle of his ruling political clique. We can certainly say that boldly and without any hesitation.
On the night of March 6th, it became known that Hungary had unjustifiably detained 2 vehicles belonging to the Oshid Bank cash collection service and 7 Ukrainian citizens. These were employees of the cash collection team. This happened in Budapest, and the Ukrainians were carrying out regular transportation of foreign currency and banking metals between Ukrainian and Hungarian banks. The vehicles were transporting $40 million, 35 million euros, and 9 kilograms of gold. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Andriy Sybiha, stated that the Hungarian authorities have effectively taken the Ukrainians hostage and stolen the money. Contact with the employees of Stadtbank has been lost, and their current condition is unknown. Ukrainian consuls are not being allowed access to the abducted cash couriers. According to media reports citing sources, the vehicles are located on the secured premises of the Hungarian Counter-Terrorism Center, which is under the control of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Meanwhile, the Hungarian Tax Service has confirmed the detention of 7 Ukrainian citizens. They stated that the Ukrainians are suspected of money laundering. A criminal case has already been opened regarding this matter. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine is urging its citizens not to travel to Hungary following the detention of cash couriers and the theft of state bank property in Budapest. The agency noted that it cannot guarantee the safety of Ukrainians due to the arbitrariness of the Hungarian authorities.
A country that has become a victim of aggression is being accused of aggression towards Hungary, even though this is an outright lie, which is basically obvious, since Hungary has clearly become an agent of Kremlin influence. All of this is absolutely logical. And it reaches a peak where there is now room for political terrorism in the form of seizing armored cash-in-transit vehicles.
At the same time, Putin is actively helping Orban in the overall scheme of pressure on Ukraine. On March 4th, Hungarian Minister Péter Szijjártó personally collected 2 prisoners of war from the armed forces of Ukraine in Moscow who hold dual citizenship, Ukrainian and Hungarian. Orban has already called this the liberation of his people from forced mobilization. Ukraine condemned the transfer of its citizens without any coordination with Kyiv as a violation of international law, calling it a provocation and the politicization of the sensitive issue of prisoners of war. But what preceded these events, and why is it that right now Orban has started to put especially strong pressure on Ukraine? Let's figure it out. On March 5th, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban stated that he was ready to use force to make Ukraine resume the transit of Russian oil through the pipeline. Druzhba? According to Orban, Hungary has political and financial tools to force Ukraine to resume oil transit. At present, Hungary has officially appealed to the European Commission, demanding that Ukraine be forced to comply with transit agreements, while the European Union has stated that the suspension of Druzhba does not currently threaten the bloc's energy security. For his part, President Zelensky once again reminded that the oil pipeline was damaged precisely because of Russian attacks. And here it is worth recalling that Budapest, as one of its levers of pressure on Kyiv, is using the blocking of the European Union's loan to Ukraine in the amount of 90 billion euros for 2026 to 2027. And it is the only EU country that is not allowing this decision to be adopted. Most likely, it was this factor which President Zelensky mentioned the day before that became a new twist in this story.
We hope that a single person in the European Union will not block the 90 billion, or at least the first tranche of the 90 billion, and that Ukrainian soldiers will have weapons. Otherwise, we'll give this person's address to our armed forces, to our guys, and let them call him and talk to him in their own language.
Later, the Hungarian government called this statement by the Ukrainian leader an open threat. The leader of the Hungarian opposition also criticized these words. Peter Magyar believes that the Ukrainian president should retract his words about the Hungarian prime minister. After that, in fact, it happened, the detention of Ukrainian cash couriers in Budapest. But many experts believe that even if Zelensky had not spoken out like that, the government led by Orban would still have acted according to its usual scheme. And there are several reasons for that.
Here, it is quite obvious that this blatant selling of his entire political soul to the Kremlin, which Orban has clearly and undeniably done, is a significant concern. This progression ultimately and unavoidably led to the fact that in this complex devolution which transpired throughout his career as a prominent democratic youth leader, he eventually became an unmistakable and overt strategic agent of Moscow's influence. He is a deeply corrupt and completely self-serving figure who is primarily interested in maintaining the steady supply of Russian oil. In 4 years, he has failed to take any meaningful action whatsoever to diversify these sources, since it provides a direct personal benefit for him. Consequently, this entire situation is also a completely logical development, and
all this is happening against the backdrop of the crucial April elections to the Hungarian parliament for Orban.
in the specific context of these upcoming democratic elections, when for the very first time since the year 2010, there is a significant and credible challenge to Orban's hold on power. A leader who is clearly an autocratic ruler and who, ever since 2012, has had persistent and deep-seated disagreements with the European Union because he has consistently and openly disregarded its fundamental principles and core values. Fundamental principles and the core principles of democracy, well, yes, it follows quite naturally and logically that in this ongoing struggle he is embarking upon this specific type of strategic path.
Obviously, as long as the Hungarian government is headed by the pro-Russian politician Viktor Orbán, Ukraine will always face pressure from Budapest. But can Ukraine and its partners counter this, and will Orbán remain in power? Only time can answer this question.
Even though the US is asking Ukraine for help in shooting down Iranian drones, this does not stop them from continuing to be friendly with Putin. The US, together with the Russians, voted against the IAEA resolution condemning attacks on Ukraine's power grid. Yes, the US, just like Russia, decided not to condemn the destruction of our energy infrastructure. The United States joined Russia, China, and Niger as a fourth member. They opposed the resolution adopted by the UN Nuclear Control Board, which condemns attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure as a threat to nuclear safety. This is the first time the US has voted against such a resolution in 4 years. And as the Americans explained, this does not contribute to peace. Meanwhile, China is already against Russia. The Celestial Empire is taking power in Central Asia, gradually absorbing regions of Russia, which it has historically considered its own. And now there's also an economic blow. The US wants to switch China to its own oil. The US is considering asking China to buy less oil from Russia and Iran and more from the US. On the eve of the planned Trump-Xi summit in April. Here are the details. Russia and China are increasingly talking about a friendship without limits. Moscow calls Beijing its main strategic partner. But now a new geopolitical game called Russian oil is beginning around this friendship.
And when it comes to Russian-Chinese relations, you can confidently say that whatever the season, it's always spring.
At the beginning of April, Trump is preparing his visit to China. And it is there that the US is considering the possibility of asking Xi to reduce purchases of oil from Russia, instead to buy more American oil.
It is completely impossible to imagine that the loss of Russian oil volumes would allow the global energy sector and the world economy to remain stable and predictable.
Most likely, a drop in oil export volumes will lead to a decline in the Russian economy. But no matter how you look at it, today, China remains one of the largest buyers of this oil. Moreover, Putin sells it to his friend at favorable discounts. As for
Putin, he simply has no other choice. And if something really does happen in China and China stops buying, then things will get really bad for him. Of course, it makes absolutely no sense for China to refuse this offer, at least for the time being. And I really don't see what could possibly change that position right now. At the same time, we should look at the situation more closely.
In the West, it is being said more and more often that China has significant influence over the Russian economy. Therefore, it can use this influence in politics as well.
But you know, this war is actually being fully supported by China. And China could call Vladimir Putin and end this war as soon as tomorrow by stopping the supply of dual-use technologies that it is selling.
Beijing is gradually expanding its economic presence, even in regions that were previously considered Russia's sphere of influence. For example, in the countries of Central Asia.
China is strengthening its influence in Central Asia. In Kazakhstan, it is ready to build a nuclear power plant. In Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, it seeks to take over the automobile markets. In Tajikistan, it is claiming the mining industry.
China is investing in roads, railways, and infrastructure. Today, it is already the largest trading partner for many countries.
This process has been going on for a very, very long time. Chinese interests in Central Asia are at different levels in different countries, but have been present practically from the very beginning. After the collapse of the USSR, China's influence there became so strong that it has become, as we can see, undeniable. If earlier this was noticeable only to those who closely studied these countries, of course, it was the influence of Russia. It is still felt, but it decreases with each passing year.
Since we've already mentioned the friendship without limits, it's precisely about the fact that China is strengthening its position even within Russia itself, especially in the Far East. And it seems that the Russians themselves don't really like this.
And the Chinese have long been saying, look, Baikal is ours. I say, that's right. Soon they'll say Crimea is ours too. They're already using all our resources, gold, coal, oil, gas, everything. It's a world power, but we live in poverty.
Although the funniest thing is that it's Russia itself inviting Chinese companies, counting on investment and regional development.
Putin has actually brought a lot of old Soviet jokes to life. There was this old Soviet joke. The night on the Finnish-Chinese border passed quietly, and Putin is moving at an accelerated pace toward making this joke a reality. And undoubtedly, as of today, Russia depends on China in every respect.
Interestingly, there's already panic inside Russia itself. Russian media claim that China allegedly intends to reclaim its territories. In
Chinese history, textbooks very often mention that almost all of Siberia, including Western Siberia up to the Tomsk region, are temporarily lost Chinese lands. And
here it seems she has decided to play by the Kremlin's rules, since Putin also likes to tie everything to history. Chinese
various business enterprises are exceptionally engaged and active in the vast Siberian and Far Eastern territories. The Chinese are actively settling these lands and taking the resources.
So is the transfer of Russian territories really just...
Is it really just a matter of time? But we often find ourselves waiting for the future to unfold, watching as the seconds slowly tick away. Every event we anticipate seems to be governed by this steady, unstoppable clock. But of course, if we talk about large territories like the Far East and Siberia, Chinese expansion is already underway there. In many places, it's business-driven, and in some, it's simply total.
It seems that the policy of the Celestial Empire is quite simple. Everyone simply chooses what is most beneficial for themselves. And it doesn't matter whether Putin is involved or not.
If someone isn't getting in the way here, well, fine. We'll take advantage of the situation here, and then we'll see what happens next. If it's profitable, we'll maintain some kind of relationship. If it's not profitable, we'll just walk away. And
let Putin keep living in his rosy dreams about having a reliable partner in China. In reality, though, Beijing acts according to its own logic, taking resources, technology, and investments. But it never takes risks for the sake of someone else's interests.
It has become known that two Russian Tu-142 bombers approached Alaska and Canada. This was reported by the North American Aerospace Defense Command. In response, the US and Canada scrambled their F-35 US Air Force fighters, 2 F-22 fighters, 4 tanker aircraft, as well as 2 Canadian CF-14 fighters and another tanker. The Russian aircraft were detected in the Air Defense Identification Zone of Canada and the United States. Why the Russian aircraft were there at all is unknown. General Salikov, Shoigu's deputy when he headed the Russian Ministry of Defense, is facing prison for corruption. But Salikov is just one link in the colossal chain of bribe takers and squanderers that have proliferated in the Russian military leadership. We will tell you about them.
The calm in the Russian Defense Ministry did not last long. The investigation reached Shoigu's closest associate, Ruslana Salikova. As much as he knows, nobody knows about the former minister and friend of Putin. Salikov followed Kuzhagetovich around like a Decembrist's wife.
No one was closer to Sergei Shoigu. I even think his mistress was less close to him than Salikov, because it's been over 30 years. Through all the positions, whether it was the governorship in the Moscow region, or whether it was a post at the Ministry of Emergency Situations, or the war at the Ministry of Defense, he was always his closest and first deputy. So he's a super trusted person, a man who, of course, is not a military man, not an emergency worker, not a politician at all, but he held these important positions. And he was always one of Sergei Kuzhugetovich's main money men. And we see that now, when he's already been devoured, Shoigu is left without his closest associates at liberty.
The only difference from the wives is that Salikov never refused privileges, and even more so, wealth. Like any respectable Russian official with a modest salary, he registered everything in his children's names. And Ruslan Salikov has as many as 4 children. And he managed to provide for all of them, as investigators from Navalny's team assured.
Through their company, Liza and Yulia Tsalikova bought a 264 square meter space in the Moscow business center Crosswall Kamovniki for 132 million hryvnias, and several office spaces at Posledny Lane, Building 24, with a total value of 85 million hryvnias. The Tsalikov sons, Daniel and Zar, were even luckier. They own real estate using the same scheme as their sisters. Through their company, Dominus Z, the brothers bought 2 land plots in the village of Krasnoye in Domodedovo. One of them, however, they have already managed to sell. Each plot is almost 1,000 sotkas and costs 260 million hryvnias.
The Tsalikovs also registered 5 premises to Dominus Z at once. The total area is over 1,000 square meters. In the sugar factory business center on Zemlya Neuval, they are worth almost 400 million. They bought the real estate quite recently, right during the war, in total. We have traced the total assets of the Deputy Defense Minister's children to be worth 1,100,000,000 hryvnias.
If we don't pay attention to our own children, then why, excuse my expression, did we even have them?
At the Ministry of Defense, Salikov was in charge of propaganda. He led the Unarmia youth movement, the Patriot Park project. In addition, he was responsible for the personal PR of Sergei Shoigu and acted as his wallet. Salikov controlled the financial oversight department, meaning he managed the ministry's enormous budget.
Ruslan Salikov is something like a grand vizier, house manager, treasurer, and financial director all rolled into one. During his time at the Ministry of Defense, the period we know especially well, he handled the most important assignments that came directly from Sergei Shoigu. If land needed to be distributed in some settlement, to generals and deputy ministers, Ruslan Salikov was the one who handled it. If someone needed to go and negotiate with someone on sensitive issues, it was Ruslan Salikov who took care of it. If it was necessary to siphon off a 1 trillion ruble budget allocated for construction for the Ministry of Defense without raising suspicion, Ruslan Salikov was the one who handled it. Only after that did Timur Ivanov get involved, who I believe is now in prison and will remain there for the rest of his life because they won't let him go to war.
It was Timur Ivanov who, after ending up in pre-trial detention, testified against his boss, Salikov. And even then, according to media reports, he refused to participate in a face-to-face confrontation. According to the VCHKU GPU, the general was supposed to be detained as early as last spring, but at first he was protected by Shoigu and later by Marat Kambolov, vice president of the Kurchatov Institute Research Center. Thanks to this, the process was able to be halted. For this, Salik paid $20 million. But the immunity did not last long.
Several participants in other corruption scandals gave testimony against Ruslan Salik at once. All the underjudges, pilots who made deals, having cooperated with the investigation and received the right to a special procedure for the consideration of their cases in court, at a minimum, all the defendants in Timur Ivanov's cases regarding the purchase of courts bypassing sanctions and the embezzlement of bank funds. Intercommerce gave testimony that Salik was behind it all. The accusation of organizing a criminal community may indicate that law enforcement intends to combine the cases of Ruslan Salik with those of two other former deputies of Shoigu, Pavel Popov and Timur Ivanov, as well as other high-ranking officials of the Russian Ministry of Defense.
Already now, Russia's main propagandists are reporting that Salik could end up behind bars for 20 years. Moreover, all his property could be transferred to the state. Ruslan Salik is the last of the 4 associates of Sergei Shoigu with whom he came to the Russian Ministry of Defense. And now, in the highest offices of Moscow, they are searching for an answer to the question, will Zhigetovich's closest associate betray his boss? And what will Putin decide? Will he really forget their fishing trips together and pine nuts in the taiga?
We are high above the clouds, much higher than the clouds.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Strength to the Ukrainian defenders, both men and women. Glory to Ukraine. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. See you next time.